Welcome to the Get Mental podcast. My name is Dave Matthews, here again with an awesome podcast here for you. I have my guest, Jake Iggy from Iggy Sports Talk. Jake, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. How about yourself, Dave?
Doing amazing, doing awesome. So Jake is here by way from, I believe, is it Boston? Is that where I'm reaching from?
Yes, sir.
Boston, Mass. Love that. Former college athlete. Hey, look, let's dive right into it. I want to talk, and I ask this question to every one of my guests that's on the pod. What are three mental skills that you would say are the most important, either that you've seen in other athletes, that you've seen in yourself? If you were to categorize, again, just right off the cuff, skill number one, two, and three, what would you say are the three most important?
I think number one is like awareness, self-awareness, awareness of others, awareness of, where you're at. Something that I hear from speaking with a lot of athletes is like they wish that they were like more in the moment during their career. That's a very, I hear it from almost every single athlete. And then, I think it's also just like the awareness of like that I might not be the best player on the field. There's a lot of ego that goes with athletics. There's a lot of ego that comes with life. And I think the best that you can to have that self-awareness or just the awareness of others and how you're maybe impacting them, I think is a really powerful skill to have. Curiosity as well, I think is number two. That's something that I really try to focus on a daily basis is being curious about whether it's opportunities with work, whether it's, stuff with my podcast or just like relationships, like how can I, build that relationship further? How can I help that person? And, I think with an athlete or just like a person in general, being curious about like what your identity is outside of that sport. I think is something that is huge. We hear a lot of times the lack of identity outside of the sport that you play is something that a lot of athletes struggle with, especially once they retire. And that's something that I hear over and over again. And then, I would just say, confidence. I think confidence is something that the ebbs and flows of life, it's difficult to always stay confident and even keel at all times. But I think being able to go back to your center place of knowing what your strengths are and why you should be confident during those lower times in life or during those lower times in sports, I think is super critical. And, my favorite sport is baseball. And so the failure that comes with that and the confidence that you need to have to be able to keep that level head and go from the one at bat to where you strike out to the next at bat to where maybe you hit a home run. And, it differs with every situation or every sport.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. I love that, man. So again, the awareness, right? The awareness of who you are, the curiosity also of who I am, as well as maybe even curious as far as my emotions are concerned, right? Why am
Right.
I feeling this way versus why am I feeling that way? From moment to moment, it can definitely be something. And then lastly, man, that confidence. And you said that your favorite sport is baseball. Did you grow up playing ball, and kind of what was your topping out point? I guess was it college, high school, or what?
Yeah, so I grew up playing baseball. My childhood home had a backyard with sort of it had like a rock wall, and it was sort of like a makeshift baseball field. And so, I'm an only child, and I for hours, would just like throw the ball up to myself, imagine myself as a David Ortiz or a Manny Ramirez, and come up with scenarios in my head. And it got to a point as I got older where I had to like kind of like beg my mom to like play with me if I didn't have friends over or something like that. I'd be like, I'll hit lefty, you know what I mean, if you play with me, because she just got so used to like me, beating her or whatever. And actually, I never really had like the God-given talent. There's a lot of politics that goes with sports, and there was that politics in my town, and I was a smaller figured kid. I still kind of am, and throughout middle school, I didn't make my middle school team 2 years in a row because I was told that I was too small, and that was something that I used as a motivation. And I started going to a training facility every winter. Like you said, I'm from Boston, Massachusetts, or I grew up in New Hampshire, and so there was snow on the ground during the winter when most people in California or in Florida are able to train all year round. I had to go into a facility to be able to do that, and so really tried to start focusing on my physical strength and trying to get to the same level that maybe those other people were who had that God-given talent. And so, my freshman year, I rode the bench, and I really used that as a motivation of that, using that doubt to build up my own confidence of just watch and you'll see. And that really came to fruition my sophomore and junior year of high school. Those are my favorite years playing baseball. I only played throughout high school. I wasn't good enough to play in college. Just didn't really have the opportunities at the varsity level. The team that I played for, they won the championship my junior year, and went to the championship my senior year, and ended up losing. I was a part of both of those teams, but it was cool during my sophomore and junior year. Why I say that those are my favorite seasons is because I was one of the best players on the team. I was able to win the offensive player of the year, and that was a cool achievement for me 2 years in a row, to where I was doubted, and I was told that I was too small early on in my journey, and I didn't allow that to deter me from continuing to show up each and every single day and try to do my best. And it was unfortunate because later in my high school career, that fun of playing the game wasn't as prevalent due to just the pressure and anxiety that came with the pressure of needing to win every single game. And, if we made one mistake, it was like the end of the world. But, for my sophomore and junior year, it was just the fun of playing the game.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And again, thank you for sharing your story. I mean,
Yeah.
for the athletes that are kind of listening to this, or whoever stumbles upon this, I think it's really important that we kind of hear this trope a lot, right? And whether it's in comics or whether it's in TV or what have you, like, Michael Jordan got cut from his high school team and this stuff. We hear this trope a lot, and maybe I'm going to harp on it because I also fit into it. Being a 5'7" individual as myself, like I got laughed at in basketball, right? Like, yeah, eighth grade didn't make the team, same kind of story. So I guess, Jake, like, where does that come from? Because there are really two outcomes there. Like, you get cut or told that you're not good enough, you could just quit. And what, I guess, went through your mind personally when it came to that type of adversity, and I guess the mindset that you had, where you, again, we're told one thing, faced with a certain quote fact, we'll call it a fact if we want to, and then you said, you know what, I'm going to double down on this and kind of go in a little bit more. I guess what goes into that mindset, and again, we hear this trope a lot, but for you in particular, what went into your mindset at that moment, some of your heat of the moment thoughts, and some of the values and beliefs that you had to kind of dust yourself off and get back out there?
I would say just like, the belief in myself, and knowing that I was better than maybe what other people had thought. I think, the passion of the game definitely played a factor into it. I just didn't want to stop playing until somebody told me I couldn't. And that's, sort of how it went in college. But I think that, the belief in myself and the continuing drive to want to get better each and every single day. And, I had some great people around me who helped me train during the off season. And, I felt like I was really able to find the cheat codes of how to be a good hitter. I was never that great at fielding. I was always very good at hitting. And, that's why I ultimately ended up, winning the offensive player of the year, 2 years in a row. Those are my best achievements that I got throughout my playing career. But I really think it's that belief in myself. And it's interesting too, because the mental aspect wasn't as aware. I didn't have as much of awareness for it back then. And it was actually interesting because I thrived better when I was angry. When I struck out my first up at bat, I would really use that anger out in the field and in the inning where, we were fielding, to really hype myself up for that next up at bat. And then when, I got up the second time, I was really frustrated with my performance and kind of like beat myself up to a point to where I knew that I just needed to hit the hell out of the baseball to be able to feel better about it. And, that's sort of the opposite of maybe what I would recommend for people, because they always say, go up with a clear mind and go up loose. And I think as well, looking at each up a bat, or each drive, for football, or each shot as an opportunity to learn from it, and not to dwell on maybe those failures, but to use it as a learning lesson. I think that can be used not only in sports but also in life.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love that. And offensive player of the year twice. something was kind of working for you though, right? Where you said you didn't really focus on the mental aspect of sport. And this is where, just full disclosure, I love when the science doesn't necessarily match the reality,
Hmm.
right? And kind of what you just said was very interesting, because the reality of the situation was for you in that moment that you relied off of like anger, right?
Yeah.
Or there's just some of these emotions that kind of
Hmm.
came from that, whether it's that I'll show you type of mentality that allowed you to kind of get back on the field, and become offensive player of the year twice, right? So getting from being cut to offensive player of the year twice to
Right.
now, using that anger as fuel and as motivation. And you said that, when I got up on the plate, I felt like I had something to prove, because I wasn't playing well. But you're
Yeah.
like, hey, in hindsight, I know that they tell you to have a clear mind. And again, I love this dichotomy because I'm not totally wedded to the science. Love the science. Absolutely love the science. But I know the reality works differently. Talk to me about that a little bit more. If we could double click on that thought process when it comes to the emotions of I don't necessarily want to say of you just keeping it there's a term that I'm looking for that's slipping my mind right now, but yeah, talk to me about those emotions of going out of bat and actually the benefit of having emotions when you're at bat.
Yeah, I think it was kind of just like all I guess maybe like built up, and it was nice because once the hits just kept on going, there was that confidence. I really can't fully place my finger on it, but it was something that happened, even when I was in Little League. I had an experience where I think I went like 5 games in a row where I was like 4 for 4. And that even like happened like my sophomore year. Like I had 4 games in a row where I was 4 for 4 with 4 doubles. And like before each game, I had, one of my friend's dads kind of be like, you're on something right now. Like, and, I didn't really like think too much about it. I just like went up and just played my game. And I think that confidence definitely helped. I was the number 2 hitter on the team, and I went from sitting on the bench throughout my freshman year to being the number 2 hitter on the team. So that definitely helped of that confidence and knowing that like I was one of the best players on the team, at least, for the team that I was playing on. And I think being able to, have that confidence in yourself is so vital, but like also not allow it to like feed your ego as well. There was a part of me that it did start to happen. And I think being able to be a good teammate is really important with that aspect. And, something that, I think, really is something that affected me in my later life from something that I experienced in Little League. And I spoke about this on my own podcast recently. Was the idea of not feeling good enough. And I spoke about obviously getting cut from my middle school team, but especially like in like Little League, like how coaches speak to you is like really vital. It same thing could be said with parents. How you're spoken in your adolescence can really tie back into maybe the things that you struggle with in your later life. So, for me, a lot of my anxiety stems from the feeling of not feeling good enough. And that could have stemmed from, maybe me not getting the good enough grades that maybe my parents had expected me to get, or in my mind I had thought that, or I wasn't meeting the expectations of some certain coaches, and that's maybe why I got yelled at, or maybe that's why I didn't make the team. And so it's interesting how those early experiences in sports, or just in any situation, can really maybe tie back to some struggles that you can have later on in your life. And there's really no way I think that you can avoid those because they happen for a reason. But I think being able to have the awareness for those things, and that curiosity, kind of like we talked about earlier, of why and where did that come from, I think is really interesting. And then going from there on how to ultimately relieve that, or interrupt those thoughts when you can.
Ooh, such a good point, right? Like, when does something productive become counterproductive? And I guess what I'm hearing from you is something that I've seen in myself, seen in the athletes that I coach or that I'll meet with or counsel with, is this proliferation of these seemingly good skills or traits, this underdog mentality this ability to have perfectionism or perfectionistic tendencies, which on
Mhm.
their face present as positive attributes, but can proliferate fairly quickly into counterproductive things. And for you in particular, I guess what you just said was, yeah, I had this underdog mentality. I had this thought of like I was never good enough. I had this like almost maybe this led to imposter syndrome or something of that
Yep.
being, right? But just this underdog of, hey, I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough, may have proliferated into grades and other aspects of your life. I guess could you talk more about that? And I guess when slash where did you see that the most?
Yeah. So I mean, I also had sort of an underdog, I guess, story, even with my own like career, and it was sort of something that my dad brought up to me, of like when I was doubted early on in my career, he was like, look at back at what you did at baseball and like tie it back to baseball. And how did you use that doubt to like fuel you? And it's interesting because I actually used my story of baseball as my college like letter. I really like fed into it, and then ultimately I think where I found that of the idea of not feeling good enough was in college. And it was something where in high school it happened, but I wasn't aware of it. And then in college I found myself like really needing the validation of others and the feeling of needing to fit in. And would even spend few minutes before I would like go out and see friends and just like look at my closet to see like what I could put on that other people would like, not so much of like what I liked. And maybe what would attract girls more, or maybe what would help my validation and make me more friends or whatever. And remember very vividly, I was working out. It was like my senior year of college, so just like 4 years ago. And I don't know what it was, but it just like snapped in my head that like my anxiety stemmed from not feeling good enough. And immediately, looked into a therapist and really wanted to try and dive into like why that was, and dig more deeply into it. But I think those were the early parts. I spoke about the sports aspect, but that's where I really figured it out, was like in college, of needing the validation of others. And I think that also really ties back into you know this general day and age of social media, of the need to get validation from others on social media through likes and the comparison of how you look compared to somebody else. And the feeling of gratification that you can get from social media population, or even just population in college or high school or whatever. And I think it's a little bit of a cancer in our society right now, because I hear a lot of people speak about that feeling of not feeling good enough. And I even one of the most popular sweatshirts that I see in terms of like mental health, I have one myself, is "You are enough." And that is something that I write down. I even just got chills right when I said it, but like that's something that I write down as a positive affirmation every morning. And that's something that if I see somebody that's struggling, try to you know reignite their belief that they are enough and that they are not alone.
Yeah. Oh, I love that, Jake. I absolutely do. I've seen that hoodie myself, where individuals will wear it. And look, it's really interesting to me because there's so many positive things that sports can give us, and we've heard these lines, these philosophies before, right? Have your kids play sports, for not force, but I mean, for lack of a better term, force them to play sports in some way,
Yeah.
shape, or form. There are parents out there that are kind of forcing their kids to play sports, but
Yeah.
really just encourage as much as you can for your kids to play sports because of all these benefits. And I'm not saying that they're not there. They're most certainly there. The leadership qualities, the
Mhm.
self-esteem, right? The figuring out that I could overcome adversity, that the leadership qualities, the ability to communicate effectively with my coaches and one of my teammates. All of these
Mhm.
skills, all well and good. They're great, as a matter of fact, but they also come with their downfalls, which I don't think is talked about enough in sport. The negative self comparison, the coaches always coaching towards talent and not hard work, right? And how that can
Or
follow
even to
you
help benefit
into,
their own kids.
yeah, yeah, or even to help benefit, their own kids. And I think that a lot of the times these positive messages that we feel are also can be exacerbated into negative outcomes, such that we see ourselves engaging in, again, the social medias and the negative self comparisons. And let me riff on self comparison for a second, because where self comparison comes from is a good thing, right? It's good to be in a society, or a tribe to which we compare ourselves to other individuals, because they can actually raise our levels of performance. We
Right.
know whether or not we're acting within the social norms of what is, quote, acceptable or not. Now, again, that could get us into danger at times,
Hmm.
but when the negative self comparison becomes way too much or over exacerbated is during these states of, what do I wear so people like me,
Yeah.
right? Or am I truly enough? And what does that mean? Will I ever reach that, quote, enoughness?
Yeah.
And really commend you on seeing a therapist and seeking help, right? Because these help seeking behaviors, especially in a society which, um, being male, it's difficult, and it can be frowned upon. I guess talk to me about that journey of that realization, and to the extent to which you would want to talk about, your journey in therapy and seeking counseling, and just even coming to grips with your past of, your identity in sport, in
Yeah.
dealing with this underdog mentality, and if that's still a healthy part of you.
Yeah, so I mean, I've been seeing a therapist, multiple different ones, around three in my life. But I started, I believe it was around fifth grade, and I basically started, because my parents were having some struggles, and then ultimately when I was in eighth grade, it was a situation where through that therapist I was able to be told that they were getting divorced, and I think that was a really healthy way to do it. And it was a good way for me to express my feelings at a younger age. I never expected to, be speaking about it, how I do now, but I'm grateful that I do. And I'm grateful that I had those experiences. And, I even do it to this day. I had a conversation with, my therapist, this morning, and, I try to be very open about, some things that I speak about, with my therapist. If, if there's something that I'm speaking with a friend, or something that ties back into something that I spoke about, I don't mind saying I spoke to my therapist about this morning. I think that's obviously there's times where things are confidential, things are private, but
Sure.
I think being able to connect to that normalcy of like
Mm.
you're not alone. I'm talking to my therapist about the same exact thing that you're talking to me about right now.
Mhm.
And I think that sort of underdog mentality, has always kind of been in me. Like I said, from sports, and even in my professional career, I changed my major going into my junior year, and was told by my advisor, that the sports industry is going to be too competitive, and that I'm too far behind, starting my junior year, and all these people are 2 years ahead of me in terms of classes and experience. And I kind of just said, give me a year and watch. And I really use that as a fuel of fire. And it hasn't been super easy. I've really had to sort of make experiences for myself, and that's why I started the podcast. And obviously there is those comparison syndromes, uh, or those comparisons of people who might have gone to a Syracuse, or to a school where they were able to get some really great experience that was able to set them up in a much better position than I was at, after graduating. But something that my mom always tries to remind me of, and I try to remind myself of, is I mean, nobody's journey is linear. And if I hadn't started my podcast, and if I hadn't gone through the experiences that I have had early on in my career, I might not be where I am right now, and I might not be as much of a self-starter kind of as I've been able to be, of kind of teaching myself how to do the podcast and the editing, the social media, sort of what I work in now with DraftKings. And I think those different experiences all add to your toolbox of how you approach situations in everyday life, but also how you are as a worker and how you are as a person. And I think through those underdog times, I just tried to go towards my support system. And the thing with me that I think has helped not only in my career, but just in general, is being able to be open to making connections and making many relationships as possible, and just absorbing people's advice of their experience, which is maybe way more expansive than mine. is, not only just in, career wise, but also in life. And, I'm always trying to learn, that's, we spoke about even before we started, you asked me if I have a background in sports psychology, and, I learned all my stuff from, professional or personal development books, as well as, Jay Shetty and, different podcasts like that. And, early on, my dad was bringing me to, success conferences, and, having me meditate, journal. And, I would have never thought that, it would be so instrumental in sort of, the relief in my mental health on a daily basis, as it is, to this day.
Wow. I mean, just your story from the younger times that you've been seeing a therapist until now, and then your openness with I guess the roller coaster ride of you just dealing with this underdog persona, right? That you've kind of embodied, I think is awesome. And the the individuals that I think get the most flack are the David Goggins of the world, right? Where they have this kind of underdog story. They push themselves to be greater than they are, and some people, I guess, kind of say that maybe you're too hardcore. And I'm not comparing you to David. I'm just saying like the mentality of these underdog individuals and how far they've come
Really?
uh, is quite interesting to me. And then even from that, just being kind of born into it, right? Like the meditation, the going to success conferences, the reading. By the way, I love Jay Shetty. Shameless plug for Jay. He's awesome. Love his pod. Um, it's just kind of this like again, these mentalities are very serving in a lot of ways. They can also metastasize into, I think that what you called it, a cancer. Um, and look, on this pod as well as with my athletes, we talk a lot about self talk,
Yeah.
and the inner dialogue, and kind of what that means to us as athletes in times of performance. From what you've seen of yourself, but even of other athletes that you've had on your podcast, I'm sure there are really good golden nuggets in there of just like mental skills and things that they've used to overcome difficult situations. I guess talk to me about like your inner dialogue, your self-talk. That how do you monitor that inner dialogue to control it, to be able to perform at your best personally? And then also, like, is there a story that maybe comes to mind from athletes that you've interviewed just surrounding the mental skills that have made them highly successful in their sport?
Yeah. So, just starting off with myself, I think, early in my, you know, feeling of anxiety or overthinking, or my awareness of it, I guess, you know, I didn't know how to sort of stop that, inner dialogue, or continuous inner dialogue. And I think, you hear it a lot of times, but it really truly starts and ends with how you begin your day. I think, just getting on your phone immediately, and, I do the same thing at times, but, I've been really trying to be diligent with myself of, turn my alarm off, turn on some lo-fi, grab my, great gratitude journal, and, write down 10 things that I'm grateful for, and write down some positive affirmations, and then go right into meditation, and then, look at my phone, but it really just starts with the morning routine. But I think as well, just in those different moments of, there's a trigger throughout the day, or there's something that, really, maybe triggers you to like overthink. I think being able to remind yourself of some of those positive affirmations that can really serve you of, I am strong, I am smart, I am creative. And, you brought up even imposter syndrome earlier. And, that's even when I was feeling that, I had to remind myself that I am good at my job. My job does not define the value that I bring to the world. My job does not define who I am. And I think as well, being able to have the awareness of, what does trigger those overthinking thoughts, and being able to have those people around you that are able to, pick you up, maybe when you are forgetting what you can be grateful for. And, my parents are very great at that. If I'm feeling a little bit down, and I'm, having sort of like a victim mindset of, like, this is happening to me, they try to remind me of like what I should be grateful for, and some things that maybe I'm overlooking. And so I think, that has been really vital. And then, I think one thing that I it's been super critical for, you know, my mental health, and just being able to, you know, each day, you know, feel grateful just to be alive, is, you know, going outside, and really being as simplistic as I can about, you know, what I'm seeing. And the more that I am able to remind myself that we're on a spinning rock in space, like, the better that I am able to have just a clear mind and a relaxed just state, and the feeling of groundedness. And, you know, that's something that, you know, I've heard from, you know, athletes, specifically, you know, Marcelo Meyer. He's one of the Red Sox top prospects. Him and I spoke about. I asked him, you know, we see JD Martinez, we see Rafael Devers right before they get into this batter's box. You know, they do a big deep breath, they close their eyes, and they just like focus in on that moment. And I asked him, sort of big part of the game, pressure moment, like, how do you sort of lock into that specific at bat and not allow the external stuff to like really get to you? And he said, you know, the simplistic aspects of, you know, feeling your hands on the back, feeling your, you know, cleats in the dirt, and really just being in the moment, and not focusing on everything else that may be happening. And you hear a lot of times with like some professional athletes, there are those, they describe it as you don't even hear the crowd, you know, you're just in that moment. And I think if you're able to do that more, whether you're off the field or whatever, I think being able to focus on those simplistic things is super critical. And that was something, when he told me that, you know, I immediately went back to that feeling of, you know, nothing really matters around a spinning rock in space. You know what I mean? There's birds chirping, you know, they're trying to find food themselves. You know what I mean? So like my problems of like what I'm worried about, like the impact that like it really has, like it's only in my mind, and how much I really make it a big deal in my mind.
Yeah. Yeah, and it could take the zoomed out perspective, I think, is really crucial for athletes in general. And some of the things that I remind my athletes too is you're just playing a sport. It's just a sport. Like, remember when you fell in love with the sport, like way back in the day, and now, you know, you're competing for, I don't know, a gold medal in downhill skiing or whatever it is. That's awesome. It's still a sport, right? And it's tough, and I'm not trying to minimize it necessarily. I'm just trying to back up for a second and slow down a little bit, right? Is because
Mm-hmm.
we get so wrapped up in the performance and the accolades and the pictures and the autographs and all that good stuff, and all that's great. I'm not demonizing it or anything, but it can be difficult to do that. And so for you, when it comes to minimizing the anxiety, and when it comes to even great athletes, when it comes to minimizing their anxieties, to how can I fully just stay in this moment? And maybe it's zooming out of it, maybe it's zooming in, but it's not being ruminating on my thoughts, right? It's not, you know, getting caught up in the future, or beating myself up about the past or anything of that nature. You said something about the your job doesn't define who you are. And I want to get into this like athletic identity piece of it, because it could be
Mm-hmm.
quite interesting, I guess, when your at bat ruins your entire day. It's also something that you look forward to possibly the entire day. And I know that either college or professional athletes, a lot of the things that they do is that athletics is also a part of their identity and who they are. And it's easy to say to not do that, but it's harder to do it. And I'm also confused about whether we should or shouldn't do that. Like, I guess my question to you, and this is more of a philosophical one, and I don't necessarily have the answer. Maybe it is individualistic, but how much of our identity should be wrapped up in our athletics, and what is that healthy balance to you?
I think it's really, I mean, in terms of, you know, a percentage wise, I mean, you know, for your job and, you know, your own personal life, I think it's got to be kind of like 50-50. You got to have your life outside of your work, and there's no, or your sport, and there's no ignorance to that. Your sport or your job takes up majority of your time, and that's maybe how you make a living and you survive. And I think with each sport, you know, has that pressure already built into it. You know what I mean? And maybe that one up at bat or that one play could define if you have a job that next game or you don't. And, there is that pressure tied into it. And I think being able to understand your identity outside of that sport. So, when it all is all said and done, there isn't that feeling of who am I outside of this, and finding those small aspects of life that do bring you joy and do bring you feeling of like you're feeling alive outside of just that specific sport. And that can be difficult, especially with how much time does get put into a sport from, little league to, when you become professional. And to be able to become professional, you have to obviously work at it for long hours, and you have to put a lot of time and, at times neglect family time and friend time, and that time where you're able to sort of explore what those other things are. But I think being able to have that balance is super important. People, I mean, it's become a lot more of a popular topic, but obviously, work life balance. And I think especially when there is that professional athlete, I think that being able to have that balance is just super healthy, and it adds to you not bringing home that feeling of failure or even achievement at times, and being able to in the moment be with your family, be with your loved ones. And I just go back to Jason Kelsey when he lost the Super Bowl. He's on the bed with his daughters, and sort of the documentary that they did. And his daughter was like, "Dad, didn't you like lose? Did you guys win?" And he's like, "No, we lost." And he was still like playing with his daughters. He was still like acting like he was in a good mood when he was definitely crushed after a crushing loss in one of the biggest games of the entire season. And I think especially when that pressure of this is a job, and this one up at bat or this one play could define my job, like, it's good to have the awareness of that, but not tie so much of your identity or ego or validation of who you truly are to that. Because then, it's a 50-50 if it works out or not. And, that other 25%, doesn't work, or that other 50% doesn't work, that's going to be crushing. And I think tying that much value into it is really unhealthy.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely can be. And I really do love that example, right? Because it rings true so well, um, of that loss, right? Because I mean, he cares a lot. Jason Kelsey, right, cares a lot about winning, right? And to lose, and then to have your loved one ask if you won or lost, which I also think is funny, right? Like, maybe they don't remember, maybe they're just children, whatever, just kind of asking, and then dad's like, "Nope, we didn't," but we're just gonna keep playing, right? Because life goes on, and
Mhm.
it's tough when, again, to your point, the stakes are high. Undoubtedly, at that level, they're really high, and there can be places at high school ball where they're also pretty high, right?
Mhm.
Where the data matters, the facts matter and remain, and if you are batting under 300, you're not going to college, right? Or whatever the statistic is, whatever that threshold is, or this is what's getting you that D1 scholarship, and that's what's not. And we know this, I think, because we are a bit older now. But at the time, it did seem like my life, right? It did seem like life or death, quote unquote. And for some of us, it really, that is our reality. And so zooming out is difficult. Having the expectations for myself is difficult, and managing those emotions of, or feeling that I'm not good enough, is really challenging. And so I guess I'm going to ask you, like, when you were in high school, and I don't know how many letters you got from college, or if it was your choice or not to go the college route. I guess, what was that like for you to not play college ball? Was that something that you really wanted, or no?
It honestly wasn't like a huge downer for me.
Yeah.
I for me, like, I didn't, my senior year when I went up to varsity, and we had like 5 D1 players like already slotted into the lineup. I didn't play a ton, honestly, and so it was a little difficult for me to have that confidence that I was going to be able to play at the college level. But when, that didn't work out for me, there was sort of that question of, what's next. And, I wasn't able to fully figure out like what my ultimate major was going to be, or what my passion lied into in terms of my career, until, like I said, my junior year, when, I did, reignite. I already had that passion of sports, but I didn't know if I wanted to do it as a job or not. You know what I mean? I didn't even honestly really think about it. And so I think, there is that, acceptance with it, but, it's so tough just in general to be able to manage college baseball and classes, and being able to have a social life and everything like that, and trying to still get experience to set yourself up for when you do graduate. And so it's very beneficial, and adds to the stress release that comes with college. But I also think too, like, if you don't make it, it's not like the end of the world. You know what I mean? And I think too, with the amount of time that it takes up, maybe you're able to reallocate that time to stuff that helps yourself personally, and you're able to make more memories out of it. But I still did like intramural softball. I still play softball, to this day. And so, I'm still able to, play an aspect of a game that I do love. And so, if you're still able to like tie back into that competitiveness, I think it's something that, could benefit you, if you're one of those people.
Yeah, yeah, love that. And now you've kind of transitioned your performance skills, I guess, if you will, or your attention to podcasting and hosting your Iggy sports talk radio. Um, I guess update the people on how that's going, but even more specifically, what has the journey been like up until now, with everything that you're doing? And if there's like one, I guess, interview that sticks out to you, with some of the, I guess, most prolific from what I've seen, maybe A Rod might be one of those people. um I guess, how did that interview go? Were there better butterflies beforehand? I mean, take me a little bit maybe into the back edge of this, because again, you self-admittedly kind of dealing with your own struggles, mentally, and we all are, right? And especially if that came across any of ours desk, like, hey, you're going to interview this guy, right? And
Right.
then we're talking big A Rod, level person. There have to be some sort of self doubt, or maybe there wasn't. Was there any imposter syndrome that came to mind, for you? So, I guess transitioning now from sport into a different performance context, how did you take the skills that you learned in high school and kind of apply them to this different domain?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I had been, making videos throughout high school, and I was editing. And something that I didn't bring up is, throughout high school I got bullied for YouTube videos that I made. And so I used that kind of as like a fuel, when I did start my podcast, as something that I already had experience, doing on camera stuff, but not focusing on the validation of others, or not really tying into, if people didn't think I was good, or if or whatever, if they needed to make fun of me to be able to feel validation for themselves. That's, I was able to become aware of that. You know what I mean? Because most people, if they're regurgitating things that they're insecure about themselves onto you, that's a problem with them, not on you. So being able to have that awareness, do that maturity throughout college and even now, is something that I take pride in. But I started my podcast. It was a radio show, at my college, and it was a 2-hour radio show, where I was solely talking about sports. And then I really wanted to find a way to interlock my two passions of sports, and as well as mental health. And I really tried to take a deep look in the mirror of like, how do I want to use my voice, and the impact that I could have, from any video that I put out. And so, rather than just speaking about the rumors or the general storylines that anybody else is speaking about on a general podcast or an ESPN or whatever, I wanted to try and use my experiences and other people's experiences to help others, in my opinion, get 1% better each and every single day, because I think that's the goal of everybody. But while also like uncovering and shedding light some of the nuanced mental aspects of just sports and life. And so, something that I try to, focus on is obviously, the sports mental aspects, but even, as I mentioned with the life stuff, for example, I had on, a fitness professional, a year or so ago, right around the new year, and really tried to speak about the comparison of that, comparing yourself to, somebody else's physical physique, and the confidence that can come with that, and the being consistent with it, and how to do that, and even how social media ties into it. And even though I'm a guy, speaking about like how that can impact females and their confidence as well. So I really try and, obviously with the sports talk, I try to talk about sports, but, also if there is a societal issue that I feel like needs to be talked about, I want to try and use my platform to talk about it. And so, like you said, I've been able to talk to, the pleasure of talking to guys like A-Rod, JJ Redick, some of these other prolific, players, and even a guy like David Meltzer, who I had the pleasure of speaking to, different guys like that. I feel like there are those, nerves that come with it. But I felt like, afterwards it was kind of just like a pinch me moment of, I'm doing something right. And luckily, outside of, doing this specific podcast, I had hosted a Red Sox podcast, before doing those interviews, and it was a 5 days a week podcast, and I had experiences going into, the Worcester Red Sox, which is the AAA affiliate for the Red Sox, their clubhouse, and interviewing Chris Sale, where there's like every single major Boston, network with like huge, cameras. And, I'm in there just like with my little mini mic, filming with my phone, and found a way to butt in and ask him a question. Was my voice shaking when I asked him that question? Yes, it was. But, did it come out great? And did he give me a great answer? Yes, he did. And so it's been really cool to be able to have the opportunity to ask, like an A-Rod or a JJ Redick, some of these mental health focused questions, because I think it's really interesting to hear some of their longer answers. And what I've noticed is usually I'll do those from an ESPN press conference. I generally like some of the longer interviews, kind of like we're doing right now, but for those specific ones, since they are such big names, I had to go through another, way to get to those people. And so, they were, one or two questions, but it was really nice when I did ask some of those questions. I was able to get 3 to 4 minute, answers, and they were long thought out answers. Some told some stories, and, I think with the podcast, it's been ever changing, but I think right now I'm in a place where I'm really grateful the impact that I've been able to make thus far. I'm still trying to grow with it each and every single, day that I can. But I think the amazing part is you don't know when you click that post, who's going to see it. Like I didn't know that we were going to connect from one of my episodes. You know what I mean? I'm grateful that we did. And, I think that even lends itself to whatever guest you're having, or whatever, person you're speaking to, or whoever is in your life, they're there for a reason. You know what I mean? You met for a reason, and you never know how that person can impact you down the line, because there's been guests that I've had on my podcast that have, whether they've helped me get another guest, or whether they've helped me with my own personal struggles, or I've been able to help them in terms of a social media or an editing aspect, in terms of just like other opportunities. And so I think the relationship aspect has been one of the most I guess parts that I've enjoyed the most. But I think too, just like some of the messages that I've gotten of people that it's really helped them impact. And even on my Instagram, I try to, like, even if it's not a clip that I own, obviously I'll give people the credit who it is their clip, but I try to share some different videos of maybe some different athletes speaking about some of these mental health aspects. And I think when you're able to open people's eyes to things that they haven't thought about before, that's the coolest part. And especially, like, if male athletes are speaking about being vulnerable, or if they're even like, speaking about just men's mental health in general, and talking to those people who think that's soft, and then you see those people in the comments sort of like switch their opinion of it, of like, this is pretty cool. It's nice when you're able to change people's perspective and raise awareness about this type of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it totally is, right? Where you, again, elevate through your platform how we can have these and normalize some of these conversations, right, that are occurring. And I've felt more and more and more and more athletes are starting to come to the forefront and speak up, right, and say something. Simone Biles, withdrew. Individuals in different organizations I mean,
Mhm.
even like Kevin Love or like even a Kyrie Irving and people like that, like that are dealing with things, but also normalizing the conversation, right? And starting some of
Yeah.
that talk, I think is extremely helpful within our society at large, especially from the male perspective. And as a male, I can obviously would talk from my own perspective, but also say that just to normalize it, generally speaking, is a really good thing. And so I hope that you continue doing your work, and I'm just so happy that you are. I think it's honestly to talk to some of these people and normalize that as it starts to progress. I think is just amazing because the platform that they have to speak through would hopefully help somebody else, and that's the goal, right? That's the goal of this platform as well as probably yours as well, is to just offer help, right? Be of service in some way, shape, or form. You spoke about journaling and your morning routine and some of the other aspects of possibly your mental skills repertoire and what's in there. Maybe that's meditation, maybe that's other things, counseling and seeing someone or therapy. I guess all in all, if there's individuals out there struggling or like listening to this, or just even speak for yourself, because I don't want to be prescriptive on here whatsoever. What worked for you when it came to dealing with some of your, I guess, anxiety, and what are your, I guess, top three skills that you even do to this day? Are you still doing the journaling? You're still doing the meditation, the gratitude, things of that nature, and what helped move the
Mhm.
needle the most for you?
I would say just starting off, this is just like my personal opinion of I tried to go the holistic route. There are people who do go the prescription route and it helps them. In no way, shape, or form, and I deeming that, but these are just stuff that these are just things that have helped me. But as you mentioned, like the journaling, there's two aspects of it with the journaling. There's times where I'll do more of the gratitude journaling where it's like me just writing down 10 things that I'm grateful for, or even at the end of the night. Something that I've done at times is writing down three things that I'm grateful for that specific day, and three things that I'm proud of myself for that I did that day. It's just a great way to just cap off the day and be able to remind yourself of maybe some things that you forgot about and just go to bed with a clear mind, I guess, or a positive mindset. And then also sort of another aspect of journaling that has really helped me is sort of like the manifestation aspect of looking at some of my goals, whether they're short term or long term goals, and really trying to act like they've already happened. And something that when I write down the I am a sideline reporter for the Red Sox, or I am an Emmy winning reporter or podcaster or whatever. At the end of the page, I say it's already happened. Time just hasn't caught up, and it's easy. I learned that from Charlie Rocket, where I really started. That's where like I really started learning about sort of like the manifestation. He was on Logan Paul's podcast, and it just really opened my eyes of um, the power of that belief. And there is times where with manifestation, it's not always going to go how you expect, and that happened for a reason. And there's been times where I've gotten a little bit frustrated with it at times. I'll write down like I want a job, or what I am whatever the job is that I applied for, and I didn't get the job, and I'm just like, does this even work? Um, and there's times where it works, and there's times where it doesn't. It's not supposed to work, at least for that certain time, and you don't know when it will. So at least with the journaling, that's really helped me remind me of what I'm working for each day, and I think it just motivates me as well. It's a great reminder. But also, like I mentioned to you before we even recorded, like before this, I was using mental clarity, essential oils. I use aromatherapy. I put on lavender and ylang ylang every single morning and night. And that is how I don't know what it is. It just eases my anxiety. It's crazy. And I use that as well as as I mentioned, meditation too. And so I do a confidence type hypnosis, and at the end of it, it just like reminds you, like, I am confident speaking to whoever I speak to today. Like, I am my full self, I am my full authentic self. And then I think too, this is different for everybody, but for me, whether it's going outside and getting exercise, or whether it's, just going to the gym and getting exercise, I think being able to find those one or two things that is really able to help you disconnect, and get away from your phone. And something that I found too is, like, even like music, going out and listening to music. Like, I notice myself completely lose track of time and just focus in on the music that I'm listening to. But for me, hiking, bike riding, are just two things that I really try and do each and every single day. And we've talked. I'm from Boston. It's pretty cold outside. There's snow on the ground. I still try to find a way to bundle up and try and do those things. And I would also say, even if wherever you are, I try to watch the sunset almost every day. If I can, because it just reminds me of the simplicity, like we talked about earlier, of the beautiful aspects of life, and what this journey really is, and the beautifulness that comes with it, even though at times it can feel a little bit dark.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And all of, to my knowledge, I shouldn't say all, most of everything that you talked about is research backed, right? These are research backed, proven ways in which you can boost happiness, decrease anxiety, just kind of come to grips with um, your mental health, whatever it means to be mentally healthy.
Yeah.
Those are ways in which we can do it. Specifically, the meditation. There was a study that was done where it's 20 minutes of meditation for 8 weeks increased gray and white matter in areas of the brain correlated with attention, self-monitoring, things of that nature. Uh, so it can help boost your brain activity. Obviously, we know sunlight, and probably could listen to a ton of, which I have, Huberman Lab podcast surrounding sunlight and the correlations there surrounding your happiness, and
Mhm.
also the self affirmation statements. I mean, man,
Yeah.
those self affirmation statements and gratitude journaling are definitely ways in which you can help yourself. And one of the things that I wrote down that I thought was just that is awesome that I'm going to take away from this podcast. Thank you, Jake, for telling me. Is writing down something that I'm proud of myself for. Man, like I do gratitude journaling. I do those things, but I don't think that I've sat down on a daily basis. Now, maybe weekly, maybe monthly. And I do this practice too, especially when I have like imposter syndrome thoughts that come into my mind, pull up my resume and just kind of boost myself up. But right within reason, not trying to boost my ego, but just trying to like, hey, get out
Yeah.
of that. You are worth it. This is your worth type of thing. But this practice of what I'm proud of myself for that day, man, that's really powerful for me, and not something that I've heard of too often, especially on a daily practice. And that's something that I'm going to incorporate too. And the reason that is because I think that it's not only the small wins in our lives that we have to meditate on, think on, and not mm, come become numb to, but it's really the what I'm proud of myself for, and kind of incorporating some of that. I don't want to call it ego and pride because that gives it a negative connotation, but this like, hey, this is what you did. This is why it's a good job. And
Right.
and this is like fulfilling a part of yourself that is important to you. Right. And that's
Right.
kind of what that practice, at least for my interpretation of what it would do for me, that's what it would do for me. So thank you for bringing that up. That's really powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that I wanted to bring up too is, like, with that being proud of yourself, reflection is usually where I put it right in my face is, and I think it's easy to do it at the end of the year or at the beginning of the year. But just like every 6 months or every few months or whatever, especially at the end of the year, I'll look at, where was I on January 1st and where am I at today? And just like listing out whether it's the achievements or like the memories that you were able to make. It's really, I think a great way to do it is, just going through your camera roll or whatever, or your Instagram feed of like, what you were able to do and the memories that you were able to make, but also like thinking about how did you grow as a person, and how do you look at things maybe a little bit differently. But I think too, something that I try to do is just as like as a good friend, and I people do this to me as well. Is reminding people to be proud of themselves when they may not, fully remember it. I had a good friend who just put on a big event, and I just sent him a quick note of like, I just want you to like take a sec to like be proud of like what you did and how much work and effort you put into it and how much success you actually had from it, because it's easy to focus on the what's next and how am I going to one up this event or this achievement that I had, but really being able to uh, be aware of you know the proudness that you should really have in yourself. And then one other thing that I wanted to bring up, just in terms of practices that I've found, maybe if I'm having a really bad day, or if I took a really big ego hit. I had a situation a month or so ago where I was told like job wise, like that my job security was going to be like up in the air in like a few months. And, that was a little bit of an ego hit. And so, one thing that I took from Mel Robbins, and, I don't do this maybe as often as maybe I should, but I think, it's really important to bring up is the high five habit. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but it's like you like literally going and looking at yourself in the mirror and high fiving yourself. Down to the science, she brought up that anytime you raise your arms, it's an indication to the brain that there's excitement or there's something to be happy about. If you ever think about, somebody does something great in the game, you raise your arms. If you're going to high five somebody, it's a great thing, and it adds, whatever happens in the brain, it adds that positivity to it. And so, with that, high five myself and remind myself that I love myself and that I'm proud of myself and that I am enough. And I think that is really important when maybe you're feeling less confident, or you're feeling down at a certain moment.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Again, reaching out to friends. I mean, all the things that you're saying are definitely supported by research, and having a tight community of individuals that you also not only expressing gratitude for the things that are going on in your life, for the people that are there in your life, but actually giving that gratitude to other people. There is some science behind that. It's slipping my mind as far as like what the actual statistics were and all that good stuff, but I know that there is like this aspect of sharing that gratitude with other individuals that's really powerful. So for you to reach out to your friend, I mean, that's such a heartwarming story, because 100% correct, right? There's always the next one. Like Michael Jordan after a championship, or maybe Kobe Bryant, or just anybody that's won a championship could tell you that either two sides of the story. One, they fully relished it and they sat in the moment and it was great. Or this number two, which was they either got pressure for themselves internally, pressure from the coaches, or pressures from the front office to say, all right, what's next? Now we're gearing up for it. Are we going to do it again? Let's repeat. Let's repeat. And I think that some of again, those mentality of athletes that kind of proliferates into real life, it can happen again, right? Where we throw an event, or we do where you host a podcast, or you have a job, and you're kind of thinking to yourself, when am I going to get promoted? Right. And then when you get promoted, it normalizes. And then it's, when am I going to get promoted again?
Yep.
Right. And
Yep.
so it can be this uh, cycle, vicious cycle of that what's next, what's next, what's next. And for myself personally, I found meditation, and I meditate twice a day, to be able to release that and fully just be present in the moment, like fully really be there. Not only for my friends, but also for myself, and to say like, hey, that victory that you had, like pat yourself on the back, or that defeat that
Yep.
you had, it's fine. We don't have to look for the next thing, look for that next dopamine hit, or when I'm bored, I don't have to pick up my phone. So yeah, and then also, yeah, raising your hands above your head. I had not heard that before. I'm definitely gonna have
Yeah.
to take that as well. It's these little
Yeah.
tidbits of this like human physiology and how we operate or move that impact our psychology so much, that I think that
Yeah. It's
individuals need
interesting.
to bring up a little bit more to themselves.
Yeah, I agree. And I even reached out to a friend like a day or so ago who was struggling like a year or so ago to find a job. And I just saw on LinkedIn that she called in to one of her college classes, and is now being a mentor. And I reached out to her, and I was like, I just want to like, I just want you to take a step back and remember that time when you were really unsure about your future and you were really down on yourself about if you were going to be able to get this specific opportunity or any opportunity in just, whether the career of sports or any type of career. And look at you now. You know what I mean? And I think, something that my dad always reminds me is, you know, during those high points, those really high points, whether when you get a job or you get a big guest or whatever, like capture those feelings because when it gets really low and when the roller coaster starts taking the downward, you're going to need to remind yourself of that feeling to help ignite that upward motion. And I think that is something that even in the moment, like I don't usually think about it, but just thinking about it now, that's so vital and just the reflection and the word awareness, that we brought up before. That speaks to so much of being able to have that.
Yeah, certainly. And it's kind of a hedonic treadmill of sorts, right? Where an individual will level set where they are and then become used to that level of, you know, X, fill in the blank, right? I buy a Ferrari. Wanted a Ferrari my whole life. Finally got that Ferrari. It's here. It's in the garage. Awesome. It's not actually in the garage. I wish it was. But and then I hop in it and I'm like, this is great. And then it normalizes, right? To kind of not just another car, but just another car for me, right? And it's the same thing with billionaires, right? They've studied the happiness of billionaires or the ultra wealthy as compared to the
Right.
poor, right? And they found that you're not any happier. And so, to your point, it's kind of how do I capture this, remain grateful for where I am, but also again the importance of reaching out to those friends, reaching out to those people. I think that a lot of the time social media does not call I'm going to get a little bit on my soapbox here. Social media does not necessarily cause mental health issues. It doesn't. It it exacerbates the portrayal of yourself and who you want to be on social media, and then once you do that you negatively compare to other individuals, right? It's kind of just using these tendencies of our being and of our how we've been, I guess not necessarily conditioned to think, but evolutionary conditioned to think, um, and expanding on that. So the social media, if you use it right, is meant to uplift people. It's meant to say, hey, I'm going to reach out to you just as you're doing. And whether it's on LinkedIn or whether it's on Instagram or whatever, social media platform it is, and praise people for what they've done. And I think that, our first heat of the moment thought is look what they have. Why can't I have that? Or they shouldn't do that. How are they there and I'm not there?
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Or what did they do to deserve that? And it could change. Maybe it should change to that's awesome. I'm so happy for them.
And then having
Right?
that curiosity of how did they get there and what are they doing that I'm not?
Yeah. Yeah. Again, yeah, compounding on that and just saying like, that's great. How can we be a force multiplier to kind of help? Right? Whether it's help them, help yourself. I think that it really should just be maybe like a praise sort of platform of praise. Maybe that's a new social media that we could come up with.
Yeah, but as well as like just like understanding that like the highlights that they're posting isn't their true, everyday life. You know what I mean? And I think with any social media platform, I was gonna say bragging, but like it's at times it can it can come off like that because you're showing off like what you're doing, but like it doesn't always come off like that. But you want to, in most times, polish up what you're posting, make it maybe look a little bit better than it actually is, and get that validation or that ego boost, that dopamine of those likes that come with it. And I agree, like it's with anything, it's all about how you perceive it and how you allow it to affect you. And I think too, like trying to use those things that social media brings to your absolute fullest is something that I think is like super underrated. Even just like us connecting, but like something that, I did a career panel, last week, and, I said, the idea of you just connecting with somebody on LinkedIn and reaching out with no expectation that they're going to reply, but if they do, who knows what could happen, is something that I don't think enough people take advantage of. And what that one message, or what that one question could turn into, and the opportunities that could come off of that.
Yeah, absolutely love that. And there are countless stories of that, one of which I actually heard today. And I'll retell it not in so many words. But this individual created a company, and I think it was like a wipes company, like a handheld
Hmm.
wipes. And this was kind of during COVID, right? Thinking it would take off, but then, it inevitably didn't really. Sent out, I think, no less than 1,000 messages on LinkedIn targeting specifically airlines. And so it was 1,000 to, I think, one airline. I think it was Delta. And in 9 months went by, then the head of their, I don't even know what it is, like not sanitation, but something in like the realm of like, cleanliness, whatever that job title would be, reached back out. And we're talking after like 6 months. Then came, game of phone tag for another year. So we're talking a year and a half of them kind of going back and forth before he kind of hit his big break, so to speak. And it wasn't even through that person. It was that person retired, passed him off to somebody else, and then it happened. So I think that you're right, right? Those stories are popularized, but how many people are actually doing that? I truly wonder, because I don't think there are that many. And social media isn't being used to what it could be used for as far as its potential is concerned. Right? People are monetizing it. There are NIL deals all the time on social media, and it's really this platform for marketing. But it's not necessarily a platform for authentic social engagement, which is what it was meant to do. And I think that that is few and far between.
Yeah, I completely agree. And you have no clue, we spoke about it even with each of our like content, how one piece of content could change somebody's perspective, or help them find a passion that they maybe didn't know was in them, or even to find the motivation to go after something. I recorded a podcast, a month or so ago, and it was sort of like me telling my story. And, I sort of said, the first step of starting a podcast or starting anything is just starting it. And I think there's so much of that fear of, needing everything to be perfect, needing everything to be buttoned up, look as, perfect as possible, but like that is just not the reality of it. And especially with something like this, or with anything, there's going to be the kinks, there's going to be the baby steps, there's going to be the things that don't go right to start out. But that's how you learn. That's the only way that you learn. I've done plenty of, I've done a few different episodes where the audio didn't work, or it didn't end up recording, or whatever, the recording got lost. And there is obviously that feeling of
Yeah.
where you have that pit in that stomach, that that anxiety of like, oh my god, how stupid was I? But you learn from it. You know what I mean? You find the processes to make that not happen in the future. But I think especially with anything, it's just about just like starting. Like I had a friend who works for DraftKings. He was making videos about like the Kelseys, and he made one about Kylie Kelsey, and she ended up like finding it and commenting on his post, and I sent him a message and was like, yo, this is like the product of like why just acting on something with zero expectation of like how it could ultimately come out, like is just so true. Because if you didn't post any of these videos, how would you have any possibility of getting her to see it? And who knows if Jason was there too, or even Travis? Who knows? You know
Yeah.
what I mean? How videos later down the line could connect you with those people. So I think that's something that isn't thought a lot about.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. I completely agree. And it's one of those things that I think that we need more of, especially within our society today. Um, all right, you ready for a lightning round?
I'm ready.
All right, let's just do one super quick. So the first one is, what's your favorite food?
My favorite food, I would have to say probably pizza. I don't eat dairy a lot, but I'm somebody who you only live once, so got to take advantage of having some ice cream or having some pizza when you can. But I'm not very picky either.
Nice, nice, love it. When you get frustrated, what do you do? What's your first go-to?
I would say I go outside, take a few deep breaths, and like literally just look up at the sky, and the clouds, and go back to that simplicity that I spoke about. I that just like really like settles me down, and whatever I'm frustrated about in that moment, um, you know, it, realizing that it's really not that deep. I think too, like also like grabbing a journal and getting out of my head what I am frustrated about really helps because there's times where stuff you'll write down on the page you didn't even like think about, and rather than just like keeping it all bottled up in my head, I'd rather get it out on a piece of paper and just release it that way. And obviously we've been talking about like the neuroscience of like all these different things, but there's a difference between you typing it on a computer, you typing it on your phone, and you writing it down. I don't know the science to it, but I know that there's some science to it.
There is 100% science to it. Actually, for those individuals that are listening, if you are studying for a test, you have a test coming up, don't just read a chapter, don't just type the chapter, but handwritten will transfer the notes into your memory uh, quicker. It's the tactile sensation of just writing it down really helps you. Then, if you write it and then say it out loud, it's the sensation of you hearing your own voice, which doubly reinforces that. So yes, no, you're on to something, Jake. And then also going outside and just kind of looking out into the vastness of everything. I mean, when you're frustrated, you tend to, not you, but us as human beings tend to narrow our focus. When we get
Yeah.
outside, we can't help but look at everything, especially when we look at the sky, right? So opening your kind of eyes is definitely going to alleviate that frustration. It's the same thing
I, th-
with as
I was
like
just gonna
raising your
say
arms.
yeah, very true. The other thing that I was just gonna say is maybe call somebody or contact somebody who is going to relieve that. Whether that is a significant other or it's a parent or something like that, being able to bounce your ideas off of somebody else, or even at times if you hear that person's voice, it can just like ease your anxiety or ease your frustration.
Yeah, yeah. There are a couple people that'll do that for me too, and I call them. So yeah, okay. Favorite food, pizza. What's doing it frustrated? Go outside. Nice, love that. Journal, also good. Last one is, and we kind of talked about this a little bit, but what's an underestimated part of your routine, whether that's daily routine or what have you? I know, and this question came from a lot of podcasters that I listen to, at least specifically, will ask individuals that are on their podcast about their daily routine. And it's, wake up at 4 a.m., chug my protein drink. What is an underestimated part of your routine?
I would say getting away from the screens and like that sort of stuff. Just kind of being with my own thoughts. It's super easy for me, if I'm eating lunch or something like that, to want to like watch YouTube video or whatever, or watch TV. But I think like literally just being like with your own thoughts and just being with that silence, it is huge. But I think too, like, I, my side project of, Iggy Sports Talk, and even just like my own personal brand, like it's a job in and of itself. So there are times where like I do feel like I'm always working. So I think really being able to block out that hour to 2 hours, or even just a half an hour, whatever it is, to focus on one of those self-care methods, whether it's working out, going outside, or journaling or meditating. I think that like awareness part of not burning yourself out, I think is something that with some of those motivational people who talk about the working 12 to 14 hours a day, like the 4 a.m. Like, I don't believe, to be honest, in some of that motivation. Whatever routine works best for you. For me, I work until 2 a.m. and I wake up at 9:30, 10 a.m. But that's because I need my 8 to 9 hours of sleep. So it works with everybody's different type of schedule and everybody's different type of routine that's comfortable for them. So I think that piece of taking some time for yourself, as well as, you know, finding those pockets where you can really be with friends and feel that playfulness or that childlike sort of feeling is a lot of fun too.
Yeah, love that. Man, I loathe those individuals that are working out and waking up at 4 a.m.
Yeah, I can't do
Going to bed at
it.
midnight, working 12, 14-hour days. I mean, I just you're destined for burnout in a lot of ways, shape, and form. And it takes a really special
That also
person.
doesn't sound very fun.
No.
Like you get every single once in my mind, and like I'm trying to like use every single second to whether it's make myself better, make memories, or just serve myself to make each journey on this earth as pleasurable as possible. And so I think there's definitely a balance with it, and there's no cookie cutter equation to it. And so I think there's a lot of trial and error that comes with it of finding what works best for yourself, and it's ever changing. You're never going to fully figure it out. And, I say the same thing with my why or purpose. Like it's ever changing, you know what I mean? Through different experiences that I have. And, for people who are struggling to like be able to find that, just try to use as many opportunities as you can to try multiple different experiences, see what you like and see what you don't like, and what really like fills your fire in your heart.
So true. And thank you for coming on and saying that. I think it's one of the things that I echo as far as the sentiment is concerned is find out who you are. Because if you try to adopt the Mamba mentality or act like Kobe Bryant or act like Michael Jordan or Tiger Woods or any of these individuals that really pushed themselves and stepped onto the court or the field or whatever their sport is, and they're a quote killer in that, and they kind of adopt themselves as that. If that's not you, don't be that person, right? For myself personally, I was kind of in between. I wasn't like a monk. I wasn't like super super happy or like yeah everything is awesome, but I also wasn't that like killer mentality either. I was somewhere in the middle. And I think that what you're talking about too is it's the same thing with your routine. It's the same thing with how you approach your life, your spouse, your career. All of those things is really that back to your point in the beginning of what are my top three. Your number one was awareness, right? And that's self-awareness, really. And the self-awareness to say, this is the mentality, the emotions, the physical nature of my being when I perform at my best. This is how it feels. And then how can I replicate that, right? And do that
Right.
over and over and over again. And if you do that enough times, it'll just normalize itself to the point to where you just are holistically who you are, and you're fine with that. And once we can figure that out, the rest is history, so to speak.
Yeah, and that idea of like not feeling good enough isn't even going to be like a second thought, because when you find who you truly are, which it's an ever changing sort of map to find that.
Yeah,
But there is like a middle ground of like this being settled, or just being happy with where you're at, or who you are in that version of or the chapter of your life that you're in. And I think that's, if you're able to tap more into that authenticity and not try to like be somebody else, or change who you are depending on who you're around or whatever. Obviously there's circumstances where maybe you got to be a little bit more buttoned up than others, but at the same time, just fully trying to be authentically yourself. Like I think just like energy wise as well, like that is the least amount of energy that you have to put into it, rather than like trying to be somebody else and using all your energy to please other people, rather than just like be okay with who you are. And if somebody doesn't like how you're going about stuff, or how you are being authentically yourself, understand that, maybe evaluate, maybe if it's an overarching issue. But at the same time, like if you're just being you, and like that person's just being a bonehead, and like they're just trying to find something that like they don't like about you, be aware of that.
yeah, love it. Thank you, Jake. I appreciate your time today. Jake, where can people find you? What's your handle on Instagram? What's a good contact for you for individuals to
Yeah,
to tap in?
Yeah, absolutely. So, my personal Instagram, it's I am Jake Iggy, and then for more of my podcast stuff and the mental health aspect, it's at Iggy Sports Talk, and then in terms of the podcast, just in general, you can find it on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Google, all that fun stuff. Whether you just search Jake Iggy, IGGY for the last name, or just Iggy Sports Talk, that stuff will all come up.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it. And for all those listening, thank you for tuning in. I appreciate it. And Jake, I hope to see you again next time.
Absolutely, appreciate it, Dave.